Football training camp starts tomorrow. Today is Friday. The veterans arrive today. All right, we're broadcasting virtually from the NBC podcast studios. Of course, St. Xavier is sponsoring us. And look who returned, all right? Our Bears insider, Josh Schrock, fresh off of vacation, and he's got to tell me how it went. You didn't send a flight for me to step out to the Hamptons or do anything nice. That was very selfish of you. You know,
right.
like just it's not very friendly, Josh.
The cheap part of the Hamptons. I wasn't hanging out with Justin Timberlake. The world tour, my world tour is still intact.
Who wants to really hang out with just JT nowadays, to be honest with you? Old JT, but I mean new JT. I'm just joking.
Yeah, I didn't even know new JT still had tours. Good for him.
I didn't. Thank you for letting me know, even though I didn't plan on going to see it. All right, let's get into some Bears news. First, let's talk about Caleb Williams signing his contract. Now, Caleb and Rome both signed this week. It was reported first Rome signed, then Caleb, but then we found out that maybe Caleb didn't sign right away. Caleb talked about it, and of course, we had the press conference with Bears general manager Ryan Poles and head coach Matt Eberflus. We're getting to that in a second, but what did you hear about what was holding Caleb up from signing this contract, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there was that much of a holdup. I mean, I and pretty much everyone on the beat reported at the same time that he agreed to sign the deal. He didn't put pen to paper until the next day. I think the big thing is just when you don't have an NFLPA certified agent, and Caleb kind of talked about this today, alluded to it, like it just takes a long time for you as the player representing yourself and your team to understand all the nuances in an NFL contract. Like you have to go through the CBA and understand why you can and can't ask for things, why some things are certain ways. There was reported, I think Mike Florio reported that he asked for a no trade or a no franchise tag after the 5th-year option. He looked at being paid as an LLC, some kind of tax creative strategies. That doesn't surprise me. I think Caleb is a very forward-thinking individual. His dad is a very successful real estate broker in Washington, D.C. I'm sure they have a lot of ideas about how to create and sustain wealth. And I think one thing we've learned about Caleb is he's a trailblazer, right? He's going to try to push the envelope, and not in an entitlement way, not in a cocky way, just in a like, hey, like what is possible? Like I'm representing myself. I have lawyers who are not agents, but like, what about this? Can I do this? I didn't think the franchise tag thing was that big of a deal at all, because if you think about it, I mean, how often do number 1 overall picks get tagged, right? You're either getting extended after year 4 or like it probably ain't happened. Right, exactly. So not that big of a deal. The LLC thing I think is incredibly creative. I'm not surprised that didn't end up being available, right? So I think the day delay was really just probably Caleb talked about it. He was in the building until past midnight, with people just working through learning contracts, learning the CBA, reading it, and having people walk him through everything that he's agreeing to. So I think it just takes a lot longer when you don't have an NFLPA certified agent who knows the ins and outs, knows, okay, signing bonus comes here. We can ask for this. They're going to say no here. So I think a lot of questions on Caleb's end, and probably for the Bears, a lot of things they maybe didn't immediately know the answer to and had to go to the NFL and say, hey, we have a question here. Is this allowed? Is this not allowed? So I think totally normal. And Ryan Poles said very positive, right? He said he learned from Roquan Smith, which I thought he was really important that he alluded to that. He said, I learned from the first time I went through negotiating with the player. It takes time. You have to be patient. You have to really communicate. And he said it's all positive, and they both learned things about the process. And, the ink is dry.
And in a way, even using the Roquan comp, it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison, because you're talking about a player's second contract with a general manager who did not draft him, and a rookie who there's nothing available for Caleb to do now, as far as now I'm going back to SC or something like that. Like that ship has sailed. So you're coming as far as signing with this. I agree with you. The LLC thing is brilliant to try to get some of that tax money lowered. Like that stuff. And it helps players too. And then you alluded to it as far as it not being selfish. It helps people that are coming behind Caleb to look at these different ways that perhaps in the next collective bargain agreement, if it's possible, because I'm sure there's reasons that you don't want these guys to not be paying out all these crazy taxes like the wealthy, even though they're wealthy. I want to ask you this though, sticking with that. Is it more? Do you think it's more perhaps a Caleb thing as far as not having someone who's a tad bit more learned when it comes to how these go? Or is it that no agent who is really active would really wants to help him because it starts to trigger more players going down this road and lessening the amount of money that agents are guaranteed within contracts?
No, I mean, I think from what I've heard, I believe Caleb has an advisor, Tony. His name's going to escape me. He's an agent. He's active, and he's kind of helping him. He's from the DC area. He's just not acting in an agent role. I think it's more of just kind of in a like sounding board. Hey, you need advice. This is how this works, kind of deal. So no, I don't think there's any kind of thing with agents not trying to help him, because I mean, I think most players are going to want an agent. I think you talk to players and like, I remember when Roquan was going through it, we talked to guys in the locker room like, oh, did you ever think about representing yourself? And it was always like, no, why would I want to do that? That takes way too much time out of my schedule to do all this, right? Because you technically have to negotiate for yourself. Like Caleb can talk about his team, but the NFL bylaws dictate you have to do the negotiating with the team. So I think most players are just going to be like, hey, take the whatever 15% and take care of it and let me know how it goes.
Man, that 15% can be a lot when you talk about players going broke at the end of their career. Yep. To where it's not, that's 15% can mean a lot more. Anyway,
I mean, for a rookie deal like Caleb's, it makes total sense not to have an agent, right? It's slotted money. You're really not negotiating over that many things. I think from Caleb's standpoint, like I said, he's just asking questions and learning, because it's not like they're haggling over 10 million, 15 million. Like you're just getting this money, right? It's not when Sam Bradford got whatever $100 million when he went number one overall in the NFL, was like, okay, this is done.
I just wonder, okay, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I remember when Roquan, and for everybody, Josh wasn't here then, but he runs the NFL as far as knowledge. He knows what Roquan, when he got signed with the Bears, or was signing with the Bears, that there was a delay, and it was about verbiage as far as what happens. I believe kind of with that fifth year, it was some verbiage, with that option, right? And I remember thinking then, and saying on whatever platform I was allowed to be on back then, that this could be a problem when his next negotiation takes place, right? And it did actually become a problem. So today I was thinking this, I was like, probably if things are going well and how this team is lined up, I think the next deal with Caleb will be, I won't say it'll be easy, but he's going to get $65 million or something like that when it's time a year. But I think the third deal, and it also depends on where to bet, that could be where they separate and go different ways when you're talking about how much his AAV may be and where everyone is as far as him and his career, and where this organization is as far as their window and how much money they're willing to dedicate to him and to all the weapons that he would still probably ask them to surround him with.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the second deal, if Caleb Williams is as good as everyone thinks he's going to be, the negotiations are going to be like, the bar is here, you top it, we all go on. They'll probably negotiate over guarantees and when it's guaranteed and signing bonuses, but the money's going to be pretty straightforward. But then you're talking about that's going to be 9 years, the third contract, 10 years down the road. That's when the difference could be made. But the NFL could have a totally different structure as far as, the salary cap goes with quarterbacks, the way things are going. I mean, I just don't think it's sustainable to have quarterbacks making 60, 65, $70 million. And you're going to have teams have a cap. Like, you got to have a separate quarterback.
We've talked about this.
You're going to have to. It's going to get to a point where you're just going to have to, or no one's going to be able to field the team other than a quarterback.
Yeah, you're going to have to pop. Basically, what he's saying, and Josh and I have discussed, you're going to have to pop that quarterback number out of the salary cap, because
or like
it's going to take up too.
It counts like 30% or 60%. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you're going to have to do something, because in our lifetime, we're going to see a quarterback make $100 million a year, which, again, I'm for the players. That's wild. But again, think about what owners are making, but that is a lot of money, even though, and it's the crazy part, we think it's a lot of money. And I'm not saying that after I say this, it still won't be a lot of money. When you think about the taxes coming out, a lot of times we look at that big number, and that's not the true number. You have the fees for the agents, you have the taxes for where you live in, for the states you play in. And so there's a lot that goes around, and you have to pay the NFLPA. So it's a lot coming out of that number that you look, where it's not that straight number. And depending on the state, because if you live in California, whoa, right.
Yeah. I mean, you heard Draymond Green talk about it, right? He was like, man, I signed a $160 million deal. I'm not making $160 million.
No, not at all. Not at all. But anyway, Rome Odunze was also there. Caleb from Rome held their press conference today. A friend of the show, I believe Herb Howard, asked the question as far as Rome wanting to be the best receiver and how to go about it with two stud receivers already in the room that are veterans with them. What did you think about what Rome had to say, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to Rome a ton of time, right? I think that's just who he is, right? And we know how he's wired. I think everyone's wired like that. I think the cool thing about Rome is what we saw at the combine when Marvin Harrison didn't test and Malik Neighbors didn't test and Rome Odunze could have not tested and said he was like, oh, I'm just going to do everything. I want to do everything because I want to prove I'm the best. And that's how he's wired. And I think we've talked about it probably for the last 3 months now. I think my expectations for Rome Odunze this season have increasingly gone up. The more I've gotten to know him, the more I've watched him practice, the more you listen to Matt Eberflus talk about him and praise his mental acuity and how quick he is to learn the playbook. And I do think that, do I think he's going to be the number one option on this team? No, that's going to be DJ Moore. I don't think there's any question it's going to be DJ Moore, but could I see him being the number 2 option by the time the season's over? Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a world in where they maybe even take it easy with Keenan Allen, right? Especially at points in the season, guy with soft tissue history, maybe that snap count goes down a little bit because they're thinking long-term as far as playoffs and Rome sees a little bit more. So I'm not surprised. And I think Rome Odunze is going to surprise people as much as a number 9 overall pick can, because I think he's going to be featured a lot more than some people think.
I do too, and I think a lot of those chunk plays are going to end up going in his direction, and it's going to cover up for maybe not receptions, but the yards maybe a tad bit more because he's going to get a lot of chunk plays with the type of coverage those other 2 receivers and those tight ends will get. Real quick, training camp coverage is brought to you by your local Chevy dealers. Head to ChevyDriveChicago.com, the official truck partner of the Chicago Bears. Listen, I want to ask you this. You mentioned as far as talking to Rome a lot, and I know nothing has changed, but maybe it's evolved even more. Your thoughts on Rome as a player and the type of mind that he has on his head. You alluded to it a little bit, but has anything else stuck out to you as a better way for me to preference it?
No, I don't think so. I just think the more you talk to him either on mic or off mic, you just get a really good sense of how mature he is. Like, he just is. Like, I mean, we talk a lot about how Caleb is a pro, and Caleb's been a pro for a long time, but I mean, Rome is a very mature kid. Like, this is a guy who he is just locked in. He's all football. Like, there's just no nonsense with him. Like, and I think he, like Caleb, really understands the situation that he finds himself in, right? He understands he could have gone to the Titans, or he could have gone somewhere where, I don't have a franchise quarterback, or I don't have 2 other all-pro wide receivers around me. And I think he realizes how big this opportunity is. And I think that's why I think that drafting Rome Odunze was so important, not only for the Bears, but for Caleb, because they are wired similarly. And I think for them to play off each other and grow together and really push each other is going to be big, not only for this season, but just for the long-term trajectory of what the Bears are building.
I'm happy you said that, because one thing that I was going to say, and first of all, these 2 gentlemen are young people and they're human beings. So there may be a slip up. No one is going to sit there and say it, but they're wired in a way that they're going to try to get the best out of them. Like their focus will be on football. And it's not, I'm not taking a shot at anybody, because I think their last quarterback's focus was on football. And I also think their last quote unquote lead receiver prior to DJ being here. And how am I blanking on
Mooney?
Yeah, Mooney. I think Mooney was really all football.
No
what I'm saying? It just didn't necessarily work out. Cole Kmet discussed his optimism today as him and DJ Moore were in an interview, and said that how he was always optimistic. Your thoughts on that? And I got another Cole question for you as soon as you answer this question.
Yeah, that's a very athlete answer, right? Yeah, every year we show up and we think we're going to win the Super Bowl, even when we're clearly rebuilding and it's in the basement. I think Tremaine Edmonds said something similar, where you don't listen to the outside noise, and every year we show up and we think we're going to win the Super Bowl, and we've shown up with playoff expectations, and we flopped, and we've shown up with no expectations and made the playoffs. We talk about the Bills, obviously. It doesn't really surprise me. I thought the answer I really liked from Cole today was just kind of talking about being a veteran along with veterans and DJ and Keenan, and talking about how you help a rookie quarterback develop when you guys are on different tracks in training camp in the preseason, right? Like, these guys are going to be and Caleb will be gauged to a certain standpoint, but these guys are not going to be supposedly getting a ton of reps, but they do need to get on the same page with Caleb. And I thought Cole was interesting. I remember who asked him, but someone asked him, like, are you willing to play more in the preseason if it means you get better? And he's like, well, they do pay us to do that. So I guess if they ask me to, I will. And then everyone looked at DJ and he just kind of went, I'm like, I don't really want to play. You remember last year, 2 screen passes, 2 touchdowns. He took himself out of the preseason. He's like, I'm all set. No, thank you. So I think a lot of that's going to come in training camp, because I know Matt Eberflus talked about the preseason plan and maybe tinkering with things. I think it's probably going to be pretty similar to what it was last year, for better or worse. I think that's just how they're wired. Starters get 40 to 50 snaps, and that's it.
DJ, I know he's more of a leader that's a follow me kind of guy than a rah-rah guy.
Yeah.
But I bet if he's cool with you, he's hilarious, but his eyes can tell a lot. Like, his eyes say a whole hell of a lot, to say the least. Back to Cole. Mm-hmm. This year, first of all, where was he at as far as leadership hierarchy in the past? And where do you think he's at right now as the Bears are about to end the training camp tomorrow, Josh?
No, he was high last year. He was on the leadership council. He's very, very respected in that locker room. And I think for what is still a pretty young team, I think Cole's going to be kind of relied on a lot, just because not only he's a veteran, but he's been in this organization, right? I think Keenan is a veteran, and he can be leaned on in terms of, like, he's been through a lot of different wars with the Chargers, and I'm sure he's seen a lot of different things. But I think a lot of players respect Cole because he's kind of been through a little bit more than everyone else. And he's a really good guy. Like, I think that means a lot. Like, I think we make a lot of the media good guy award, and he won it 2 years ago, but Cole is just a really good person. And I think he's just well respected in that locker room. And I think he'll be a key leader. Especially I think he's probably more vocal in the locker room than you would expect. Like you said, DJ's kind of a follow me guy. Jalen's kind of a follow me guy. They lost Bojack, who was vocal, right? So they do need a couple voices to step up. And I think especially on offense, they are quote unquote all silent assassins, right? These are guys who just, they like to catch passes and they go back to the huddle and the defense jaws at them. So they need a couple guys to be vocal. And I think Cole has that. I think Cole has that in him.
We'll get right back to today's press conference. You mentioned Bojack, Eddie Jackson, and Eddie Jackson today signed with the Baltimore Ravens. Your thoughts on Eddie landing with a pretty good defense and a former Bear in Roquan Smith?
Yeah, it's a very Ravens move, right? You need some safety depth. Let's go get a former All-Pro, who I think has a little bit of game left. I don't think Eddie's done, but I think he clearly was zapped with that foot injury. So if the foot is better, I expect him to play well in that defense. I know he'll be happy to be back with Roquan. But just happy that Eddie got another opportunity, right? I figured he would. He's one of my favorite guys I've ever covered. A really good dude. So happy for Bojack, and it's a good spot for him, right? I think that's a defense that'll probably suit him well.
Matt Eberflus was talking about or asked about snaps and mentioned 45 to 55 snaps. Your thoughts on will it actually come to fruition? And Josh, when he's saying those snaps, of course he's mentioning starters, but is he mentioning perhaps majority of the units? Because I know it was different with Justin because the offensive line was beat up.
Yeah.
But for me, the question really pertained more to Caleb than just the team is its entirety. And I kind of felt like his answer may have been kind of centered around the starters instead of just Caleb.
I think that 50 number is probably for starters in general. As far as Caleb's concerned, he talked about it during OTAs. The staff went back last year and watched how much Bryce Young played, how much CJ Stroud played, Anthony Richardson. They've talked to Thomas Brown about it. And I think what they're trying to toe the line between getting the necessary reps. And Matt talked about, preseason's important, but you're really not seeing much. Like, teams are not going to throw things at you. It's all vanilla base shell stuff, right? And you're going to see more in practice. So they're trying to toe the line between getting Caleb the necessary in-game reps to work on, digesting the play call, verbiage, cadence, all the things you need that environment to work on, but not overexposing him. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to, as it did with Justin, right? Is the line healthy? Like, what is around him? Because they're not going to put Caleb out there in danger. So I think I would bet Caleb plays a little bit more. I'd probably put the number maybe 10 more, 60, 65 snaps if people are healthy. And it might be less if they get dinged up like they did last year before the Colts preseason game and, they have one starting offensive lineman healthy. Caleb might not be out there at all in that game because, what's the point?
I know that Javon Dexter is the 3 technique. And the focus with the questions today was on defensive end, but you can give me that guy anywhere on that line right now, and I would take it as far as adding additional pressure to the defensive line.
Yeah.
Your thoughts when Ryan Poles, or what did Ryan Poles have to say as far as what they will do with the defensive end position or adding depth or the lack thereof?
Yeah, so Ryan said basically, our job as a front office is to always be looking at everything, and they are looking, right? They know who's out there. But what they want to do first is get a better grasp of what they have on the roster, especially when the pads come on next week, and just see what Austin Booker's capable of, see what Jacob Martin's capable of, see if DeMarcus Walker can be more of a DN2 than a DN3 and a kick inside guy on pass rush downs. So I think what Ryan, if you read between the lines, what Ryan is saying is, yeah, we're going to add, but we need to see what we need to add. And I also kind of want the price to come down a little bit, right? We've learned anything about Ryan Poles. He's incredibly disciplined. I mean, the guy, he just sets his value mark and he's going to wait for you to come to him, right? He did it last year with Yannick Ngakoue, right? We talked about Yannick Ngakoue for 6 months. And the day before, like 2 days before camp or whatever it was, or it might have even been into camp. Boom, got him. Cool. I think it was into camp. It was like a week into camp. And Ngakoue signed for what Ryan Poles probably deemed necessary. So I think the Bears will add. It just depends the price and what, right? I think Yannick Ngakoue makes a lot of sense because Ryan, he talked about the Bears athletic staff has been part of the rehab. They obviously have a good rapport with the agent. Yannick knows the scheme. The sack rate went up when Montez came. That makes a lot of sense. But there are some other options, right? Emmanuel Ogbah, Carl Lawson, guys like that. But they're going to add. It's just going to probably take some time. Ryan's very disciplined, and he also doesn't want to probably add before he knows exactly what he needs to add. Because if the pads come on and all of a sudden Austin Booker is 10 steps ahead of where they think he's going to be, then maybe you add someone different, or maybe you add to the interior, right? Instead of just looking at a defensive end, which all the questions were tailored around. With
Yannick, Emmanuel, and Carl, which player do you think fits the system here the best?
I mean, Ngakoue makes the most sense. Like I said, I think just because he knows everyone in the building, he knows the scheme, he already knows how to work next to Billings. He knows, when they do the little crafty thing where the stunt where they put Ngakoue and Montez on the same side, they know how to work off each other. He's played with everyone. I really like Carl Lawson. I mean, he was really good 2 years ago for the Jets. He didn't play a lot last year because the Jets have 9 defensive ends and they just were like, we don't need to play you. We're going to cut you anyways. So I don't know what his health is like. I really like the idea of Carl Lawson. But I think Ngakoue just in the end is going to make the most sense. It's not going to be much of a learning curve. And then everything kind of falls into place, right? He's DN2, D-Walk is DN3, and then you just get situational snaps out of Booker and Martin, and it kind of makes sense.
Health-wise, what do we know as far as the health, or do anybody have any issues, and how guys are going to show up to camp, Josh?
Yeah, so far today, Karan Amagaji placed on the NFI list, non-football injury. He's still rehabbing that quad injury he suffered at Yale. The hope was that he'd be ready to go today. He's not. Ryan said he's progressing. He's working his butt off. Everything's on track. It's just taking a little bit longer. They don't have a timetable. So he's going to start on the NFI. And then Gerald Everett is on the NFI list. We do not have a body part or an injury on that. So no Gerald Everett for at least a little bit, start of camp. And then Jamri Chroma, an undrafted defensive end out of James Madison, was on PUP and then taken off PUP today. So short PUP stay. I think we call it the Chase Claypool.
Not the Chase Claypool. Josh, what are you looking at when you start training camp tomorrow? Just to say this next week, right?
Yeah.
And it's way too early, so the way too early assessment, but it's more of like how things are, how operations are executed and vibes as far as confidence and realism. what you've been on, you've covered several different teams.
Mhm.
What do you go in now since your season to look at if a team's perhaps going to play better this season than they did the past season?
Yeah, I think the first thing in this first week is like you said. I think the keyword was operation, right? I think are things really, in 7-on-7 is the ball not touching the ground, right? Are there no pre-snap penalties? Matty Plus was very, very adamant in mandatory minicamp that he was not happy with all the pre-snap penalties because of the cadence, and that's understandable. Caleb hasn't worked with the verbal cadence since high school, but he's been working on it. So how does that look? I think the vibes are going to be high. I mean, I don't think the vibes are going to higher around this franchise, right? I think you could just there's good energy everywhere until they lose a game, right? I mean, it is flowing. Everyone's feeling good, right? So I think the vibes will be high. I'm interested. I think the pads are supposed to come on a week from tomorrow. So I think the first week is just going to be, conditioning. I'm sure there'll be a lot of run fits, half speed red zone stuff, 7-on-7, getting people back into it. And then when the pads come on, the offensive line is going to tell me a ton. I think we have not – Caleb Williams has sucked up all of the oxygen for the last 5 months. All we have talked about is Caleb Williams, and rightfully so. That's all we should talk about because Caleb Williams is tremendous. The offensive line, I think, is not being talked about as a potential issue. And I think that starts with Nate Davis because Nate Davis did not practice really at all in the offseason. And anytime you have a $10 million starter and the head coach's response to, is he the starter, is, well, we expect him to be, but it's going to be a competition, is probably not great. And then we talked about the center, right? They really like Ryan Bates. Ryan Bates is basically a right guard. He played center 2 years ago. He's got center experience, but he's not a full-time center. They signed Coleman Shelton. They're asking a lot of Braxton Jones. Tevin Jenkins, we love Tevin Jenkins. We know his injury history. Darnell Wright showed flashes, but struggled at times last year. I know it was a long season. He had the shoulder. They expect big things out of him. But I'm very interested to see how everything looks when the pads are on and how this line comes together and how it protects Caleb Williams, a guy who is really good playing in structure, but does have an issue holding onto the ball too long at times.
Something that you just said made me think about something that Ryan Poles had mentioned in his press conference today. Yep. He mentioned the fact that they wanted to have versatility on the offensive line so that at least at the end of the year, and of course this would be probably due to injury, that you could have the best 5 out there. If you're looking at Ryan Bates, and it's not to say that you can't do the same thing as last year, but you would think you wouldn't want to, as far as what happened with Cody Whitehair and Lucas Patrick and flipping them around. But you would think if Bates is the guy that's versatile, you would want him to be ready to go at guard. And you have that connection between center and quarterback that they need, the bond that they need to make, let alone knowing the exchange and getting formidable, acquiring a chemistry with one another. It would seem that Shelton should be the guy since Bates has the versatility to play both positions.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think when they signed Coleman Shelton, that was the thought, right? They signed Coleman Shelton. We were like, cool, got the center, Ryan Bates, swing IOL guy. That makes a ton of sense. And then at the owners meeting, Ryan told us, Bates is going to be the guy. And we were like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. And today Ryan said Coleman and Bates will compete at center. So I think that tells you that I think they're thinking about it that way. And also with the uncertainty with Nate Davis, when Nate Davis wasn't in, Ryan Bates was in at right guard, right? Because that's who would go to right guard. So it does make a lot of sense to have them compete at center and probably hope that Coleman Shelton wins that so that you can have a fixed center in front of Caleb Williams, and then Ryan Bates can play right guard, can play left guard if Tevin is out, instead of starting with Ryan Bates and then you get to week 5 and someone's out and we got a shift, and now Caleb's working with the center who he has some rapport with, but not a lot.
And plus the center's cold. Just think about how many weeks the center hasn't been getting a vast amount of reps.
Right, correct.
Last question, Josh. Stadium. We heard Kevin Warren and the governor, J.B. Pritzker, met up. Any new news as far as the stadium where the Bears may play in the future, either here in the city or out in the burbs?
No, man, no news. unsurprisingly, one breakfast with Kevin Warren does not seem to have swayed JB Pritzker's idea of spending a lot of public money on a new stadium. Man, look, Kevin Warren told us in March that he wanted this done year's end and he wanted to start putting shovels in the ground. And we are running out of time really fast. And I know they've been talking to Arlington Heights about the tax bill as it pertains to this year, not about the stadium. Those are two separate conversations that I think people kind of get mixed up. Like, the Bears still own that land, so they have to talk to them about the tax bill this year, and they're working on getting that cut. But I wonder at what point, and I don't know when the Illinois legislation comes back into session, but I wonder at what point Kevin Warren really, kind of thinks about it, right? Thinks about, okay, I have this dream. I love the city of Chicago. It makes a lot of sense, but it's not happening, right? Like, it's Illinois politics. It's gridlock. They're not going to give me this money. We already own this land. And at a point, George McCaskey, you would think would come to Kevin Warren at some point and be like, hey man, we did already spend $200 million on this land. It was a good plan. Maybe we pivot. So I'm interested to see, like, if we get to year's end and there's no deal, does our focus is only on the lakefront talking point kind of dissolve?
My only thing, and you already said it, it's Illinois politics, and everyone is so sure. And I'm just like, this is Illinois. You can't be sure.
Be sure.
Common sense be damned. What are you talking about?
Right.
All right. Our guys back. We're going to have both of our guys, Josh and Alex, out at camp. Thank you to Tony and Claire. Everybody, make sure you tune in every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. to watch us on NBC Sports Chicago. Be safe as we get back into the football season with training camp opening up.
Congrats, you finished the video. If you want to build on that success, download the NBC Sports Chicago app. It's got highlights, exclusive insights, and push alerts tailored to you. Everything you need to be a real Chicago sports fan. Download it now.